Today, we're taking a deep dive into the brand new 21.1.0 system update for both the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2. An update that's small on the surface, but important beneath the hood. Nintendo pushed this firmware revision out quietly, without a flashy announcement or a breakdown of long featured list, instead using their familiar line about general system stability improvements. Whenever Nintendo says that, it typically means more is going on behind the scenes than they publicly reveal, which is why this video is here, to walk you through what actually changed, what problems the update seems to address, how it affects your console, whether you're on the original Switch hardware or the newer Switch 2, and why you should still download it even if it doesn't sound exciting at first glance. The 21.1.0 update landed simultaneously for both consoles, showing that Nintendo is now treating the Switch ecosystem as a single family of devices with shared firmware, much like how Apple updates both newer and older iPhones with the same iOS version. This matters because stability improvements on long running hardware like the original Switch can be just as meaningful on a newer system like the Switch 2, which is still growing into its lifespan and smoothing out the rough edges that early consoles often have. The one line description Nintendo provides, quote, general system stability improvements to enhance the user experience, does, end quote, doesn't spell out specifics, but it does tell us that the goal of the patch is to strengthen the operating system itself rather than add new features or interfaces. In other words, this is about tightening bolts and reinforcing the foundation. Even with Nintendo's vague wording, there are some practical real world fixes that players have already noticed. One of the most discussed examples is the improvement in video playback issues reported in games like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where certain cutscenes or replay moments would occasionally stutter, freeze, or play with mismatched audio timing. The 21.1.0 update appears to correct the behavior, smoothing out playback and reducing the risk of crashes that previously happened during those moments. Minor frame rate hitching during system video previews also seems to be reduced, suggesting Nintendo tweaked internal timing or codec behavior to keep things more stable. Another important outcome of these stability revisions is improved reliability when waking the console from sleep mode. On both Switch and Switch 2, a small number of users were dealing with situations where the console would take slightly longer than usual to wake, or where the screen would turn on, but the UI wouldn't register input for a moment. Version 21.1.0 appears to address this by stabilizing how background system threads resume after sleep. That might not sound dramatic, but for a hybrid console designed around instant on gameplay, these small quality of life corrections add up quickly. For Switch 2 specifically, the update seems to enhance compatibility and performance consistency across its more demanding launch window titles. Some early adopters reported rare instances of sudden frame timing inconsistencies, things like momentary stutter when loading new assets or returning to the home menu mid game. After updating to 21.1.0, players have reported a smoother transition experience, suggesting Nintendo optimized memory handling routines or patched internal processes that sometimes struggled under heavy workloads. The Switch 2 is more powerful than the original Switch, but new hardware always has quirks that take time to iron out, and early firmware revisions like this play a significant role in locking down stability. There's also the possibility of security fixes bundled quietly into the update. Nintendo rarely details these publicly, but history shows that many of their stability updates close vulnerabilities related to homebrew exploits or unauthorized system modifications. While this doesn't impact the average player, it does help Nintendo ensure protected online environments, secure eShop interactions, and reliable communications between the console and Nintendo servers. Given how intertwined cloud saves, account logins, and digital purchase are with the Switch platform, these invisible fixes are just as important as the more noticeable improvements. Beyond those specific fixes, 21.1.0 also continues Nintendo's trend of refining the overall responsiveness of the system interface. Menu navigation feels slightly more consistent, transitions between games and the home screen appear to load with fewer micro stutters and background processes, like status notifications or online activity checks, seem to behave more predictably. None of this is dramatic enough to be called a new feature, and Nintendo will never advertise these tiny refinements individually, but they can make the system feel more polished when taken together. These are the types of long term improvements that keep the console feeling modern even years into its life cycle. If you haven't updated yet, there's really no downside to installing 21.1.0 right now. The patch doesn't remove any features, it doesn't alter any system behavior that players rely on, and it won't affect your save data or installed games. What it does is give your system a more reliable foundation, reduce the likelihood of freezes or unexpected behavior, and help your games run in the smoothest environment possible. Even updates that don't seem exciting are still part of the long ongoing polishing process that keeps the Switch platform running efficiently. And while the update doesn't include new features, revamped menus, fresh themes, or anything flashy, it sets the stage for the next wave of firmware enhancements Nintendo is likely preparing as developers begin pushing the Switch 2 hardware harder. Historically, Nintendo introduces more notable changes only after laying down months of structural stability updates, so patches like 21.1.0 are often the calm before the storm, the technical groundwork that makes new features possible later. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay on top of everything happening with the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And as always, game on.